Here we continue the subject of making effective selections, but the subject for this video is how to transform a selection. This video carries on where we left off from making a cutout with a layer mask with our old Bentley car. Just a quick recap, we've got the original image and of course the mask that goes with it. We can hold the Alt key, click the mask and view just that and work on the mask just as we can see it here. Or we can hold the Shift key, temporarily turn the mask off to see the original image. And we've got one other layer which is clipped to this layer. We use this to repair the grille, to add that little bit of extra colour to get rid of the fringing and the halo around the little holes in that grille. So here we've got 3 wheels to fix, but the technique I'm going to use we can use on all 3. So let me demonstrate it on the most obvious, which is that front tyre close to us. I'm going to use the shortcut keys of Control Spacebar to zoom in. Just a little reminder, if you ever use those keys and zoom in too far, if you touch Control Alt Spacebar, you can see the zoom tool now is in a minus. So if you do go a little bit too far, and that's not uncommon, you can go up and down with the zoom just using those keystrokes. What I need to do is to make a selection more or less, or as close as I can get to this edge of the tyre. Now I'm not going to be able to do that in one go because of the angle of the tyre. It's not too bad here, but it could be a lot worse. If it was turned more towards us, for example, it would be an oval shape, squashed in the middle and longer at the top and bottom. So what we can do is go to the toolbox and select our elliptical marquee tool. I'm just going to start drawing a selection up here, but I'm not really going to try to make the selection perfect. If you draw out a selection, I'll start another one. You can decide on the shape, of course. If you want to draw a selection which is absolutely circular, hold the Shift key as you draw it and you will get a circular selection. But here we're going to transform that selection, and to do that we need to go to our Select menu. So we need Select and Transform a Selection. When we do that, we get a bounding box around the outer edge of the selection we've made. I can move inside that selection and I can move it around. I can pick up one of the toggles, and as you can see, as I make it smaller, the size remains in register with the width and the height. If I want to distort this, which I'm almost certain to need to do, then I need to hold the Shift key. Let me first nudge this down a little bit further, and of course you can move this around using those arrow keys on your keyboard, the cursor control keys, and that can be quite useful at times. But if I've got to find the edge of the tyre, you can see I've got a problem here. So what I'm going to do on the left hand toggle is hold the Shift and just drag it in a little bit. Now the right one I'm going to do the same. Now I need to evaluate what I've got here. I think I need to rotate the whole thing to the left. Now you can see that's coming closer to the edge of the tyre. Maybe I can now bring this in. It's just fine-tuning, looking at what you're doing. I'm going away from the edge now, so back a bit. I'm just looking. That's not looking too bad at all, is it? I think I'm just a little bit short on that side, but I think we could make use of that selection pretty easily. Now once we're happy with the transformation, touch the Enter key and there we have the selection ready to use. Now I think this is one of those times when we should be saving our selection, so let's go through the process to do that. I'm going to go back to my Select menu and choose Save a Selection. I need to give it a name. I can just call it Front Near Side, FN for short. I'm creating a new channel. This may also be one of those times that when we do the same thing with this tyre and the rear tyre, that we save the selections separately. So each time we make a new channel, so we can bring back each of those selections individually. I'll click OK. Now I know that's safe, but of course it's not entirely safe until we save the image, because that alpha channel that's been created needs to be saved with the image. What I want to do is to affect the outside of that selection. I'm using the selection here really to protect the tyre and the wheel. It's the grass down the bottom and this shape down here that I want to protect. I may have to do this bit here a little bit manually to get the way that the tyre here sweeps underneath to the edge. Should meet somewhere around there, but all of this needs to be wiped away. So what I need to do is to inverse my selection. We can find that in the select menu, but Control-Shift-I is a nice shortcut. I also need to select my mask because I'm not actually going to remove the grass at the bottom there. I'm just going to mask it away. So let me select the mask. Then I need to go to my toolbox on the left hand side, pick up black as my foreground colour, my standard soft edge brush. The flow rate, well, I think I can push it up to 100%. I'll touch the 0 key to do that. And I'll just do this bit to show you what we're going to do. But when I get round here, I need to zoom in a little bit more. But there you can see we're having a pretty good effect there. Let me use the shortcut keys once again though, Control and Spacebar, to zoom in even tighter. Because you can see what I've got here. I've got the tyre coming down, so it's sweeping in, so it needs to sweep in to about that point. Now I'm going to try to do this manually. I think it's only a short distance, and when we start to put the car into a new background, we're almost certain to make the background where the car is standing on pretty dark, and we'll probably darken the bottom edge of the tyres as well, so they sort of sit nicely on the ground. So I've got a brush that's too big, so I need to drop the size of my brush down. Looking up at my flow, just a reminder that I've got 100% there, because I want to start up here, click, hold the shift key, click, 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 click. That's the sort of thing I'm thinking of. Let me get rid of the excess here. Be a bit careful along this edge. You can see I'll make my brush a little bit bigger now I've moved away from the edge, and just take the rest of that away. Now I think that needs a little bit of refinement. I think if I do that again, I think I would come down a little bit tighter this time. So click, 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 click. You're never taking anything away here, so there's no risk, is there? So if you wanted to work on this a little bit more a bit later on, we can always come back and have a fine tune. But let me hit Control 0, let me hit Control D, nearly forgot what I was going to do then. Now you can see that the tyre needs to come in a lot tighter. As you can see by the spinning round of the screen, I have been back to the front face of the tyre, the tread, and I've adjusted that curve. It took me a couple of attempts, but there's no risk at all with this work because we're working on a layer mask. So if the curve isn't right first time, we can just repair it by spraying white or painting white, and then we can have another go. Took me 2 attempts, but I think I've got it about right. I now need to make a selection of the tyre to repair the base, and to do that I need to select the image rather than the mask. I then need my polygonal lasso tool way over on the left, because I want to make a selection of the tyre. I'm going to make a selection, I think, up there and around that part. but I only really want the front face, so I'll go a little bit past there, so I don't need to be absolutely tight, I don't think. Once I've done that, I'm going to just soften that a little bit, although I will mask it in, but softening it may help a little bit. So let's go to select and mask, just put a little bit of feather in, and OK. I'm going to output back to a selection. What I'm going to do now is copy that selection from my thumbnail here, but I need to copy it to a layer and have it clipped. So Control J will do that, but holding the Alt key allows me to clip that tyre to the image beneath. Because what I need to do now is to select my Move tool, and I can move that patch down, and you can see what the clipping does. Looks a bit weird until we rotate this, and that's probably the next thing we need to do. So free transform is what we need. Control T. Just go outside the bounding box and we can rotate this. We can drop it down into position, and we can fiddle this around until we feel we've got a repair that we can live with. I think I'll go down to about, I'm just looking at this little slither here. I could always flood that in with black, but I doubt we're ever going to see that when the picture, this image of the car, is placed in front of a new background. So I think I'm reasonably happy with that. But look, if we hit the Enter key here and commit that, you can see the angle here of that piece of the tread or the sidewall is not quite right. So here's another option. If we go back to our edit menu and our transform tools, if we choose distort, now we can possibly do something with that to make it fit just a little better. Hit the Enter key when you've done that, but now we need to place a mask alongside that tyre patch repair. I'll apply the mask, pick up black as my foreground colour, a standard soft brush. Let's make it a reasonable size. Look at the flow. I'm going to drop the flow rate down to about 5%. Now I can just gently blend in the patch where I don't want it. And I think if that, I've got a couple of blades of grass there, which if I switch to white using that X key, I can probably take them out. I went a little bit too far with my mask that side. But the odd touch of the spot healing brush would have done that. But if I hit Control 0, I'm going to suggest that that's working pretty well. I need to just darken that little bit of rubber a little bit. If you wanted to do that right now, why not burn it? Go back to the patch you've just made of that piece of rubber. Go to your burn tool, select shadows, keep the exposure quite low, and just blend that in a little bit. You'll probably find you're going to need to do this if you was putting a subject like this into a new background anyway. There we have the wheel fixed. That's the good news. The bad news is you've got to do the same thing with the front near side and the rear wheel. The front near side in my case here is not going to be that difficult because I don't think there's hardly any texture at all. It's just shadow, so that's going to be quick and easy. The back one, I think it's at an angle and you're probably going to have to use the distort tool that I use there, but it'll work fine. Now once we've got all of the different stages saved, at least for a few days, so we can spot something tomorrow and easily go back and make a repair. But there does come a time when we need to merge all of the layers together. But of course we do need to merge, not flatten, because if we flatten them all together, we'd end up with a white background. We want to retain the transparency because the next part is the fun part, and that's where we get to choose which background is going to work best in our image. There's the image that I ended up with. You can see now it's just made up of 3 layers. We have the background, we have the shadow and the car. I created the shadow just with a manual brush, just brushing underneath the car with the background in place so I could evaluate just how much shadow I felt the image needed. But this morning I did sit down and try 1 or 2 derivatives. Here's one of the options that I came up with. The background is from the same sort of open museum type place, so I do retain the historical connection between the buildings and the car, and I find I quite like this version. We could of course use the car as a main centre of interest for a historical montage, and here I've just dropped my car over the top of an old piece of wood, again from the same historic village, and it wouldn't be too difficult to drop into place around the edge maybe some old style adverts, particularly those from old cars. Here's another idea I tried this morning. I could sepia tone this to retain that historic feel. Now the reason I chose a monochrome conversion here was when I placed the new background behind the car, it had so little colour that it just didn't balance with that vivid green of the Bentley. So I only really had 2 choices. I could reduce the impact of the green on the Bentley, but that didn't look very nice. And the other option was a full monochrome. But to bring this video to a close, I find myself warming to this version. Now what I'd like to do here is just add one last part-in shot. I've selected my burn tool from the toolbox, which works from a brush as you know, and I've selected shadows from the top of the screen with an exposure of 5%. Many times I've said that it's a good idea, if you can, to save your work and come back another day, because you tend to see more in the cold light of the next day. And it's while I'm sitting here looking at this image, wrapping up this video, that I think that that green on the underside of the bottom half of the bodywork of the car is picking up just a bit too much colour given the situation it's now in. So I'd probably give that just a couple of wipes of the brush just to take that down a little bit.